Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Shrimad, His Divine Grace of Hayacharana Arvinda Bhakti Vedanta Swami Shri Prabhupada Ki Jaya Nichilila Pravishta Om Vishnupad Paramahamsa Pariravakacharya Astocharisata Sri Shrimad, His Divine Grace Shri Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur Prabhupada Ki Shri Anantakoti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Shri Nama Acharya Shri Haridas Thakur Ki Jaya Jai Rup Sanatan Bhatta Raghunath Shri Jiva Gopala Bhatta Dasa Raghunath Sadguru Swami Prabhu's Ki Friends Kaho Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Sri Gadadhar Sri Vasudeva Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Ki Sri Sri Radha Krishna Go Gopinath Shamakund Radhakund Giri Govardhan Ki Sri Vrindavan Dham Ki Sri Mayapur Dham Ki Sri Jagannath Puri Dham Ki Ganga Devi Jamuna Mai Ki Tulsi Maharani Ki Samaveda Bhakta Vrinda Ki All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Sri Sri Guru and Gauranga. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayamudirayat. Before reciting Shrimad Bhagavatam, which is the very means of conquest, one should first offer respectful obeisances unto the personality of Godhead Narayan, unto Narayan Rishi, the supermost human being, unto Mother Saraswati, the goddess of learning, and unto Srila Vyasadeva, the author. Nastha Pareshu Bhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Uttama Shloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naishtiki. By regularly attendance in classes on the Bhagavatam and by rendering of service to the pure devotee, all that is troublesome to the heart is almost completely destroyed. And loving service under the personality of Godhead, who is praised with transcendental songs, is established as an irrevocable fact. Hare Krishna. Thank you all for being here and allowing me the opportunity to say a few words about Krishna consciousness. We're doing, for those of you who have some electronic device, 11th Canto, which is considered the intelligence of the Lord. Chapter 20. Static symptoms, no doubt. Chapter 21. I think we have some contamination of the electronic devices or something. Is it? That's what it was yesterday, but we can try to move it. Anyway, I can use the other mic if we have.
Cell phone communication. It's on airplane mode.
You just got it's when I speak, it becomes static. Anyway, it's the 11th Canto, chapter 21, verse 2. This is actually the verse that I used in my chapter on in our Grihastha Vision Team book on balance. We can use the other. Everything has meaning, you know. This is the best. I'm not very. I'm soft-spoken, so. Verse 2, and space. Yeah, you can not have to sway with me, but I'll just say it. Sve sve dikare nandushta saguna parikirtana kirtita viparyayas tudosha shan ubayor esha nishchaya. Hare Krishna. Steadiness in one's own position is declared to be actual piety, whereas deviation from one's position is considered impiety. In this way, the two are definitely ascertained. Purport by our God brothers, my God brothers. Previously, Lord Krishna explained that the path of spiritual progress begins with working without fruitive desires, advances to the stage of realized spiritual knowledge, and culminates in direct engagement in the devotional service of the Lord. Here the Lord emphasizes that a conditioned soul should not artificially disrupt the natural evolution of his Krishna consciousness by deviating from those duties prescribed by the Lord himself. In the lower stages of human life, one is entangled in false identification with the gross material body and desires to execute material fruitive activities based on society, friendship, and love. When such materialistic activities are offered in sacrifice to the Supreme Lord, one becomes situated in Karma Yoga. By regulated sacrifice, one gradually gives up the gross bodily concept of life and advances to the stage of realization of spiritual knowledge, whereby one understands oneself to be an eternal spirit soul, completely different from the material body and mind. Feeling relief from the pangs of materialism, one becomes very attached to one's spiritual knowledge, and thus one is situated in the stage of Jnana Yoga. As the candidate further advances on the spiritual path, he understands himself to be the part and parcel of the Supreme Soul, the personality of Godhead, Lord Krishna. He then sees that his conditioned life, as well as his spiritual knowledge, was obtained by the personality of Godhead, who awards the results of all types of activities, both pious and sinful. By directly engaging in the loving service of the Supreme Lord and understanding oneself to be the Lord's eternal servant, one's attachment evolves into pure love of Godhead. Thus one gives up the lower stage of attachment to the material body and then subsequently gives up attachment to the cultivation of spiritual knowledge. This relieves one of material life. Finally, one recognizes the Lord himself as a resting place of one's eternal love and fully surrenders to God in full Krishna consciousness. Lord Krishna explains in this verse that one who is still attached to the material body and mind cannot artificially give up the prescribed duties of Karma Yoga. In the same way, one who is a spiritual neophyte, just beginning to realize the illusion of material life, should not artificially try to think of the Lord's intimate pastimes 24 hours a day, imitating the stage of Prema Bhakti. Rather, he should cultivate analytical knowledge of the material world, by which one gives up attachment to the material body and mind. In Shrimad Bhagavatam, we find many analytical descriptions of the material world, and they can free the conditioned soul from the false identification with matter. One who has achieved the perfect stage of love of Godhead, however, being freed from all gross and subtle attachments to the material world, may give up the lower stage of Karma Yoga and Jnana Yoga and engage directly in the Lord's loving service. In chapter 19, verse 45, Lord Krishna says, Guna dosha doshir dosha guna tubhaya varjita. One should not see material good and evil within a devotee of the Lord. Indeed, one becomes pious by giving up such mundane conceptions. Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur points out that occasionally a neophyte devotee may be polluted by association with those enthusiastically executing fruitive activities and mental speculation. Such a devotee's religious activities may be affected by mundane tendencies. Similarly, an ordinary person who observes the exalted status of a pure devotee sometimes externally imitates the devotee's activities, considering himself to be on the same exalted platform of pure devotional service. These imperfect practitioners of bhakti yoga are not exempt from criticism, since their fruitive activities, mental speculation, and false prestige are material intrusions in the pure, loving service of the Lord. A pure devotee engaged exclusively in the Lord's service should not be criticized, but a devotee whose devotional service is mixed with material qualities may be corrected so that he can rise to the platform of pure devotional service. Innocent persons should not be misled by the mixed devotional service of those not engaged exclusively in the bhakti yoga system. But those unable to fully engage in Krishna consciousness should nevertheless not give up their regulative prescribed duties, declaring them to be illusion. For example, one unable to fully engage in pure Krishna consciousness should not give up his family, considering it an illusion, for by doing so he will fall into illicit sex life. Material piety and analytical knowledge of the material world must therefore be cultivated until one comes to the stage of directly practicing Krishna consciousness. So we can repeat the verse. Steadiness in one's own position is declared to be actual piety, whereas deviation from one's position is considered impiety. In this way, the two are definitely ascertained. A few prayers. I like to chant different prayers. I know we don't have a lot of time, but this is a verse from the Chaitanya Charitamrita offering respect to one's Diksha and Shiksha gurus. Mantra Guru Aryata Shiksha Guru Gana Tanhara Charana Age Karye Vandana. And we offer our respects to our gurus who dissipate the darkness of ignorance with the torch of knowledge. Om Jnana Timirandasya Gnananjana Shalakaya Chakshur Meditam Jena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. And we offer our respects to Rupa Goswami, who is entrusted by Lord Chaitanya to help us in our spiritual advancement. Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Shtapatam Yena Bhutale Svaya Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Svapadantikam. And a verse I chant daily, I like to think about the verse 922, which for those who are engaged in devotional service, sincerely that Krishna carries what we lack, preserves what we have. Anandas chintayanto mam yejana parupasate tesham nitya vayuktanam yogakshemam bahamyam. And a verse I've been in the habit of, I have in the Shringa Shilas and been chanting these prayers for a long time, and this is a verse from the Nrsimha Purana. It says that, Lord Nrsimhadev says that whoever prays to him and sincerely, that Lord Nrsimhadev accepts that person as his ward and protects him from all kinds of calamities. So the biggest calamity for a devotee is forgetting Krishna. Tvam prapanashmi sharanam deva deva janardana itiya sharanam praptashtam kleshadudaram yaham. This is very abridged prayers here. And then we'll just go to the main ones. Jaya Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasadi Gaur Bhakta-vrinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. So this is an interesting verse, similar to the Bhagavad Gita, where it mentions that if you imitate someone else's duty, this is not recommended. You may be called a hypocrite if you falsely try to be in someone else's position. So a paraphrase of this, I believe, by Bhaktivinoda or perhaps Prabhupada's dear godbrother Sridhar Maharaj, was that true beauty is understanding where you're situated and acting accordingly. And the opposite is true, that when we don't act according to our nature, it's not attractive. So this is a basic principle of our spiritual life, that we need to understand where we're situated and where we want to go, where we are as persons. And I'm thinking this morning that it's easy to be a fanatical devotee and it's easy to be a casual devotee. Fanatical devotee means that we are not, in the name of pure devotional service, we may be intolerant of people on other paths or other devotees who may not be up to what we think is our standard. Especially when we were brahmacharis, we were, a lot of gyan was kind of creeping into our practice of devotion. We were thinking, if Prabhupada said 6 hours of sleep, then is good, and we're going to do 5. We're going to do 4. I don't know how we did it, but there was a time in my life I was getting 4 hours of rest a night, and I was always falling asleep. And I'm amazed I'm still alive, because I used to chant in the old San Francisco temple on this wall, and 2 stories down, and I'd walk on this wall and chant after I did my service. Somehow I lived to tell about it, but so we would do things like, try to sleep less, or we would take things very fanatically. There was a letter that Prabhupada said, if you're very advanced, then you can just have a cup of dal, chapati, and some chickpeas. So, okay, this is our new diet. So, we tended to go to extremes in the name of making spiritual advancement, but really detachment is not a limb of bhakti. It's a natural byproduct of attachment to Krishna. So we're stressing becoming attached to Krishna, becoming attached to devotees, becoming attached to the process of bhakti. And as a byproduct, just like the Goswamis were not gritting their teeth doing their austerities, they forgot to sleep, they forgot to eat. So we were thinking, if we don't eat one meal, we're like distressed. I mean, I did Nirjala Ekadasi for 7 years, but it's more because of my body type, not because I was really advanced. I had the body to do it. But I could have thought, look at them, they're eating on Ekadasi. Or whatever it is, chanting 64 rounds. We might think, we know that in the beginning Prabhupada wanted his disciples to chant 64 rounds. Just imagine if they could have done it. Then that would have been the standard today. But somehow the devotees were able to speak and say, we can't do that. Okay, 32, we can't do that. 25, we can't do that. 16, okay. So that's a detail of spiritual life. How many rounds we chant, what we understand as the regulative principles or details can be adjusted. Just like the regulative principle from Mrigari the hunter was to kill the animals all the way. That was his regulative, and to chant. That was his regulative principle. So we think, what? Mrigari the hunter. The story of Mrigari where he, Narada Muni, he's a very important person in the scripture, traveling, transcendental spaceman. And so anyway, he came across all these half-killed animals. And he was very distressed at seeing their suffering. And then he came across Mrigari the hunter, and he asked Mrigari the hunter if, is he responsible for these half-killing? And he said, yes, I learned it from my father. I like to see them, dying in pain. So somehow Mrigari the hunter was able to have faith. That's the power of a saintly person. Is from them we feel the current of spirituality. And we see in the presence of Prabhupada, just his glance was very powerful. This is actually mentioned by Vishwanath about certain saintly persons. It's just by their glance they can bestow mercy upon others. So this Murari was somehow, he was changed by the association of Narada. So Narada said, chant the name of Ram and kill them all away. Don't have kill them, don't cause them suffering. But by chanting, the next time that Narada saw him, he was going to pay his obeisances, and he wouldn't even, he would sweep the ants out of the way because he didn't want to cause distress to anyone. So this means that through the practice of bhakti, our hearts are meant to be changed. Our hearts are meant to be cleansed. We're meant to have an experience of Krishna consciousness. It isn't just about, we read in the purport about, we need to study the Shastra to understand the nature of the material world. That it's not really a very conducive place for happiness. At the same time, by the practice of bhakti, we're meant to have a change in heart, Nistha. The path of, we're sometimes recommended that Nistha is an interim goal. The goal of prema is practically inconceivable to us, pure devotion. So we have to begin our process. We are blessed with faith in a particular devotee. We have an initiation. Although the previous time we spend is important, generally it's considered that we get the seed of bhakti from the Guru and our spiritual life begins, and we engage in devotional service. And Artha Nivrittis, I know sometimes Satyajit Maharaj used to call it the vast intermediate zone. It's just like you can imagine this plateau that seems to go on forever. Because when we come to devotional service, it seems like we're a rocket. You know, we're making all this advancement. It seems like we used to think, the fly airplane's going to come in a few years and I'm going to be out of here. 10 years later I said, I don't know about that. You know, I think I'm going to have to. That's when I think in your 30s, when you're a teenager, when you're in your late teens, we have an existential crisis. A lot of devotees were. I was 19 when I became involved in the search for spirituality and became a devotee. And then again in 30s, sometimes you think, well, what am I? You know, I wore saffron for 9 years. I won't say I was a brahmachari, but I wore saffron for 9 years. And you get to your 30s and then you try to, what am I going to do for the rest of my life? And what's in it for me? And your psychology changes. So we have to figure out a way that we can live so that we can get through this lifetime and stay a devotee. And that requires this, what I was speaking of yesterday, introspection. Really being able to look within and understand who we are in this body. When I was just newly married and thinking about, I was 30, 31, 32. For the first time in my life, really trying to understand myself and my body. Who am I? Before it was like, I'm a soul. And that was good. That helped me come to Krishna. I was in the redwood forest and I was... every day was a quest for the truth, and I still... the realizations that I had at that time were very powerful. I had out-of-body experience, near-death experience. I was convinced I wasn't my body. I was out of my body looking at myself, looking at my mind working. I had what I believe in the Tibetan Book of the Dead is like a death experience when you have no ego. I was just consciousness. It freaked me out because I wasn't really in that platform, but it's like I had no memory of anything. I was just awareness. And it just imagine all the, because how do you define yourself, even devotees? I grew up at this time, this was my family, this is my wife, these are people that I know. Nothing. I was just in this body, consciousness. I was completely freaked out, as you might imagine, because I was still in a body. But it was a very profound experience to know that those things that we take shelter of and we identify ourselves with, it's not us. It's, now I like to go, we're not the physical form. We have to, we have a story, and in some processes they talk about you're not your story. You're not your sad story. Some of us, like I said, I could have focused my whole consciousness that I have a sad story, that I'm this poor child of an alcoholic, and I'm never going to amount to anything. So that happens to some people. Some people call it woundology. Okay, it's too bad that happened. Maybe you were abused, it's a terrible thing, sexually abused or verbally abused or whatever the background is. But the real question is, what are you going to do about it? Not that you have this identity that you wear and you limit yourself by your labels that you give yourself by your attitude. So to actually understand how to apply this verse, or these similar verses in this chapter, it requires to understand who we are in this body. Yes, in the service of understanding that we're all souls having a human experience, I have to understand my strengths and my weaknesses, how I limit myself by my attitude, and by my misconceptions. One of the problems being a devotee, we know how to look good. I got tilak on, I got dhoti, I got a Krishna shirt. I must be Krishna conscious, right? One of the reasons I wear a Krishna shirt so that you can say when you heard the Bhagavatam you saw Krishna. At least we can remember Krishna. So we have to be honest about what our position is, so that we can make progress. And it's not always so easy to be honest with ourselves and to really understand that, just like when we were brahmacharis in the 70s, when the Upadeshamrita, Nectar of Instruction, first came out, we read, at least I read, excuse me, for the first time, about the four, what is a madhyam devotee? And I said, he adores the Lord, he makes friends with the devotee, he avoids the envious, he preaches to the innocent. I said, we're madhyams, It's a really high stage, actually. I mean, and even within the stages, some devotees have said, Kanishta Kanishta, Madhyam Kanishta, Uttama Kanishta. So maybe we're a Madhyam Kanishta. That means a beginner, really. To be in Nistha, I was saying that can be considered an intermediate stage of devotion. That means you're practically beyond the material conception when you're in steadiness. It's a very high stage, actually. It means being steady. And Bhaktivinoda has correlated those stages. There's these different stages given by Rupa Goswami, starting with Shraddha, really. Every stage is an increased faith. And there's a lot of misunderstanding about faith. Sometimes it's equated with belief, but they're really different things. People believe so many things. We may believe certain things also. But faith, in the spiritual world, they're planets of faith. The material world are planets of doubt. When you're on the platform of doubt, you're on the fence. You can't really make any progress. But if you have faith, then you can go forward. In any endeavor, you have to have faith. If you don't have faith to drive here, there's just a little line separating you from someone else, and they could swerve over, and you have to have faith to get up in the morning. But faith as a substance of the soul, a part of the soul, really faith, absolute faith and conviction in Krishna. It isn't just a belief. Belief is activity of the mind. And really faith is an activity of the heart. When we really have faith in Krishna's protection, that's one of the 6 principles of surrender, that Krishna is our maintainer, Krishna is our protector. to really go deeply into that. And I can say that most of my life as a devotee has been as a casual devotee, a religious devotee. It means, yeah, hardball, I chant my rounds, but okay. In one of the plays my wife and I did, The Brahmin and the Prostitute, I said, rounds out of the way, time to play. So we don't want to be like that, We want to be that, this is our life. But we're going to have ups and downs in our bhakti. And we want to think, I want to get through this lifetime as a devotee. And that I want this to be my life. And yeah, you go through stages. When you have a family, you have children. It can be more difficult, but most of us who were brahmacharis, brahmacharinis, we couldn't maintain that life. So we needed to be responsible, to have a significant relationship, to have a particular occupation. One of the important things I like to teach is that not only do we have life issues, which I talked about yesterday, but we all have a personal mission. So that means we could say, well, our mission is to spread the glories of Lord Chaitanya. Yes, but how you do that is going to be very individual. And you have to determine, according to your nature, how to apply it. That's where we use intelligence. We read yesterday, it's not stereotype. And it's very easy to be a stereotype devotee. Formulaic, you're not doing it right. Why are you wearing pants? Why are you doing this? Again, we know how to look good, but we have to actually be good. We have to be good people. And I like to stress that we want to give, I love quotes, put them on Facebook, but they inspire me. But the thing is though, we have to be quotable in a sense. In other words, we are the representative of the tradition. We may have a guru that we love and we want to connect people to, or we want to tell people about Prabhupada, but we're the example. It isn't just about what we say, it's how we say it, it's who we are. We've all heard this before, example's better than precept, but to really think about it, that my responsibility, and this is something that all came about for me personally with the diagnosis of cancer, which really freaks everybody out. The word cancer is like, people are very, people thought I was in denial at first because I said, this is good, this is great, this is actually Krishna's embrace. I wrote an article some of you read. But I really felt that, and it really, Prabhupada says, keep death in front of you. So when you got a life-threatening illness, it's not academic anymore. You realize, I could die from this. So, are you ready for that? We got our support system, but really, like Prabhupada said, you have to fly your own airplane. On the ground, we have all association, but, just like to think about, right now a terrorist comes in here and he's got a gun, he's going to, puts a gun to your head. So what are you going to, Mother, help me! What are you going to think of? Are you really ready to embrace that? Doesn't mean you're, neurotic about it, but it means that it's a certain state of mind that we realize that, wow, life is temporary, life is short, and according to how I think, oh, that's me, sorry. It's my protocell, it's my cancer medicine. If I can find it. Sorry. It's a reminder, I might die if I don't take my medicine. I can just take it afterwards. But it was very sobering for me. And I made this talk called Facing Death to Live Life More Fully, and really trying to share all the things that I've learned in the course of being a devotee since 1970. or trying to be a devotee, really. When you really realize what is a devotee, it's like, whoa, am I really a devotee? I don't like to say I'm not a devotee. I think it's a bad affirmation. I'm an aspiring devotee. It's very high, actually, to be a devotee and to be situated even in Nistha, on the way to prema, to be steady, completely steady, no ups and downs, you have complete conviction. Before Nistha, it's a winding road and ups and downs, and at Nistha the road is straight but not narrow. So part of Nistha is also being flexible. Sometimes I mentioned about fanaticism means you're not flexible. You don't see the goodness in others. It's so easy to see the faults in people. But we see that how Prabhupada was a master motivator. He was so positive. He was so encouraging to everyone. Although he spoke the truth, but his application was very loving and very kind. And that's our legacy, to be loving and kind persons in our practice of bhakti. Because that's what's going to, if we want to have any kind of impact on people, our character is everything. Yeah, okay, you were chanting, but who you are as a person, that's preaching. How you interact with other people, that's preaching. And how much do you care? I live with a person who's a very caring person. I pray to be that kind of a caring person. So that's all of our challenge when we read the Bhagavatam, that we can actually feel for the subject matter, and we can feel for others and their suffering. Just like the one translation of that verse in the 6th chapter is that, and actually former President Clinton quoted that at an AIDS conference, that the true yogi feels the suffering of others as their own. So, to varying degrees, we're all suffering. Sometimes people say, what about the suffering people who are poor? And so you could say, well, what about the suffering people who are rich? Is it you think that people who are rich are not suffering? We want to be compassionate to people who are less fortunate, no question. But it isn't that the people who are more fortunate are suffering any less. They may appear to be. They're in more illusion. That's why the heavenly planets are not really so desirable for devotees, because the material enjoyment is so strong. There's not much impetus for bhakti. You think we practically live forever. We can't, millions of years. So, spiritual life, yeah, it's there. The devas are servants of Krishna, they're devotees, but they're mixed devotees. So we're encouraged to be pure devotees. But we have to know where we're situated. If we're a mixed devotee, then we have to be okay with that. Not that we're complacent. We had a prayer group when I was in Baltimore for 3 years. And we really had a sense of community. And we chanted, we did kirtan, we had certain prayers, affirmations that we chanted, and we went around the room, and people would just pray. They would say, my son's taking drugs, or whatever the situation was, whatever their need was. Although we're encouraged to, not bother Krishna with our desires, it's still important that we have a time when we just talk to Krishna. This is my situation, this is my desires. Because sometimes I don't know if it's the nature of the cordless technology or what, but okay, we'll see. Oh, that's better. That's even better. No, he took care of the static. Anyway, I don't want to bother you with the static. But anyway, we would just pray for whatever. Please help me in my life. That's my favorite prayer. Please help me. And when this is out of my comfort zone to speak, because I have to be up here in front of all of you. It's like I'm some big Bhagavatam speaker or something. I'm just an ordinary devotee. But it's good for me to be able to do that, and it's good for all of us. I would encourage everyone here to give class, because the preparation is very inspiring. But I tend to be rather long-winded, and we already are out of time. But the idea of praying for yourself and your family and being honest with Krishna, it's like if you got married, you wanted a wife or a husband. That's all right. But you had to think, no, I'm going to be a renunciate. It's better to be a brahmachari or a renunciate, like we used to think. We used to think that, it's brahmachari or die. I wasn't able to maintain that, obviously. But that's what we thought. We thought if a person puts on white, their spiritual life is over. So that was the culture that we grew up, and my generation, 1970, that was our culture. And we had so many misconceptions about women and families and what it took to get through this lifetime. So we got to be balanced human beings. That's really in my chapter in the Heart and Soul Connection. I use this verse to illustrate balance. We have to be thoughtful people. We have to understand ourselves, where we fit in, what we need to do to get through this lifetime and stay a devotee. Because people used to leave an ashram because their karmic mission was kicking in, that they needed to do a particular activity, and they weren't able to do it in the temples, so they thought they had to give up Krishna consciousness to do that. Because we didn't know how to preach to them that, you can... we didn't have a circle of grihasthas around the ashram to kind of be a safety net for the devotees who were left being a monk. That's what we need. Somebody who can say, this is Prabhupada would sometimes call Grihastha life the second stage. Anyway, there's so many things to say. And I just kind of rambled on here, but this is an important verse to think about. And if we can entertain a few questions, if there is any. Yes, sir.
I was thinking, you mentioned something about maybe not directly criticism, but making judgments about others and so forth. So my thought is, at what point is it okay to openly mention maybe some disturbance that we may have with something someone does that we feel may not be conducive to the environment or to themselves?
It would depend on your relationship with that person. And it depends on how big that person's ego is. And it depends on how expert you are at lovingly bringing it to someone's attention. Everything's about relationships. And you may see something in an older devotee which is improper. You may not be in a position to or have a relationship. You can observe it. That person's teaching you how not to be. You may say to someone else who may be able to speak to that person. So it's, and you have to examine your motive in bringing it to his attention. So yeah, it's very individual, and it depends on your relationship. He could, if he's senior, he's junior. There is certain etiquette. Your motivation or your ability to do that, and then you get with it maybe with a spouse or your fiance or something, and then, so there's a whole way to connect, a whole way to do that in a way that's loving. And so that really relationships and being married is practice loving. I mean, it sounds funny, but we want to love Krishna. So we practice loving each other. I mean, we try to love Krishna. We try to feel. You can't artificially do it, but we try to chant with feeling. We try to, Prabhupada said, tears are the price. We want to cry for the Lord. If we can't do that, we want to cry that we can't cry. You know, have the desire to have the desire. But somehow to be connected, to keep the faith, to have some association of persons who are at least a few steps ahead of you, who inspire you. And you know, sometimes someone who may inspire you in some ways, they may have some imperfections. So you got to be able to deal with that too. You got to see the whole character of the person. And you know, it's easy to see a fault, but to really get to know someone and who they are as a person, that requires some time. A lot of times people don't take the time to get to know you, or you don't take the time to really get to know them. We assume things about others. So we want to ask a lot of questions. People assume things, they don't really ask you questions. They just assume you're like this or you're like that. So, what time do we have to be back here? 9:30?
9:30 is when the panel starts.
Okay, so I guess we better wrap it up. But thank you. I hope there's some light. It's like when you hear a class, you think if I can get at least one idea that I can apply, then it was a good class. I'm not trying to get off the hook or anything. But I'm just saying, yes, sir.
So just a simple question, what verse and what canto and what verse?
It's 11th canto, chapter 21, verse 2. That whole chapter is very interesting, too. You know, I could have read so many things. I have this Uddhava Gita, which has the commentary of Bhaktisiddhanta and Vishwanath, and my godbrothers pretty much follow their lead in this purport. But reading the introduction to the chapter is very meaningful too. It's always good to be aware of the context of the whole chapter, if you're going to understand the verse. So, Hare Krishna.
Sad that we didn't have a little more time to ask questions and comments.
Well, we can practice austerity and not eat, and we'll just hear the Bhagavatam. You'll make a lot of advancement.
Oh, I see this little brahmachari there right now.
Let's eat and then hear.
Maybe we could have a catering session.
Because you said you're an ordinary devotee, but I think you're an ordinary devotee with extraordinary wisdom.
Yeah.
And I really, that class just on all cylinders really hit me. And so I pray that we all took that in, and somehow or other the Lord in our heart will help us to appreciate all day long, all life long.
God.
That
Thank you
class.
so much.
Thank
Very
you.
sincere class.
Very
Thank
good.
Hare Krishna. All right, so let's take prasadam and come back. Yeah, and you can ask all of your questions to the panel. What is the purpose of life?
That's one of the most important.
you. Prabhuji.
Important.